Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia video. And recently, there's been some big time plot developments in the current storyline of the My Hero Academia manga. And so, this is probably the point of no return for any sort of spoiler warning. There are some massive spoilers for stuff that's going to play out quite far into the future of the show, like a couple seasons into the future, finale type stuff. After all, it does feel like the manga's getting closer and closer to that end point. So, if you don't want key dramatic moments and developments getting spoiled, now's your last chance. Still here? Okay, so recently, Bakugo went and straight up died in a cliffhanger ending in the most recent chapter of My Hero Academia. And whether he's actually just straight up dead is a matter for conjecture. And in manga and anime, even when there is a corpse, sometimes you can't trust that somebody's actually gone, or that they just won't be revived in 5 minutes. That's just how these things work. But the reality of the situation is that as of chapter 362, our boy's a corpse, blood leaking out his mouth, and an ominous black hole in his chest. Whew. Yeah, look, there are characters that have certainly survived worse than this before. But still, the intention from the author is clearly that we're supposed to assume that he's dead. And thus, we'll be extra eager to see what happens in the next chapter. It's a classic cliffhanger. And before we get too deep into the ins and outs of all this and talk about where the story might go from here, I think I also just want to go through the context of this story point in general. So over the course of the story, we've seen Bakugo undergo some tremendous character development. When we first meet him, he's a self-serving bully whose only real desire is to win and be the best, at any cost. A character who really doesn't care about anybody else in any way that matters. Basically, he sucks. And over the course of the story, he realizes that a lot of his problems have been self-inflicted, that his anger and his resentment is misdirected, and that he really needs to reevaluate what it means to be a hero. And because of this, over time, his relationships begin to improve, and his journey of self-growth reaches a pinnacle, at least as far as the anime is concerned, when he leads his team to a clean sweep victory over the Class 1B team during the joint training exercise. He learns that you need to value your teammates and work with them, that a true victory comes from saving people, not just from pummeling your enemy into submission. During the war arc, this growth is further compounded upon as they fight the Shigaraki / All-for-One hybrid alongside Endeavor and Shoto, and a couple of others. And in this battle, it becomes quite clear that Shigaraki, despite being kind of undercooked and needing time to recover from getting enhanced by the creepy mustache doctor, is too strong for any of them to face alone. Even Deku at this point in time. And this provides Bakugo with yet another moment to prove that he's well and truly changed his mindset. That he has changed as a person overall, and is dedicated to becoming the best hero he can possibly be. He sacrifices himself for his rival Deku, keeping him in the fight, but potentially dying in the process. And I mean, he doesn't die, but it shows that his path of heroism's changed course from winning at any cost to saving lives at any cost. The number one hero mentality. And this even comes with a nice dose of Deku getting a rage power boost and taking the fight to Shigaraki / All-for-One again. And in that fight, he has a fairly decent showing. Bakugo's sacrifice actually meant something, and he also lives to fight another day. And so then this takes us to the most recent chapter. For context, the heroes had pretty much planned a sting operation to take out all the major villains at once, using Aizawa's quirk remotely to keep Shigaraki's power under control and prevent him from just straight up killing every single hero he can get his hands on straight away. And of course, since this is a manga and it has to be drawn out as long as possible, the villains bamboozle the heroes and separate Deku from the main battle, meaning a bunch of secondary and tertiary characters are now going up against Shigaraki. And of course, they have no chance of winning because they're not the protagonist, and thus they are doomed to give it a good go, but in the end, fall short of an actual victory. And that's what happens in the latest chapter, or really chapters, as our heroes relentlessly go up against him, only to get slapped down over and over again as he taunts them and mocks them. Pretty much they're just holding the line until Deku can make an appearance and kick things off to the next level and realistically win the battle as his allies get chipped away at one by one. But that's in the future. Right now, our side characters are just doing their best to survive and try to land a hit. Okay, so we start with Sun Eater unleashing a massive plasma blast at Shigaraki, a move that he combined with Nejire to produce. And this looks like a finisher level attack, I'm not gonna lie. And if it was directed at literally any other character, it probably would have been. But since it's at the main antagonist, not only does it not defeat him, it also seemingly does nothing at all. He just brushes it off. And honestly, that just feels like the power of plot. Kinda bullshit. Because if Bakugo's blasts can annoy him, this should have at least, left a scratch. Whatever. That's fine. Maybe it'll retroactively weaken him many chapters into the future, and suddenly Sun Eater's gonna seem like a big deal again. But for now, not so much. And then we have Bakugo looking pretty depressed, pretty resigned to his fate, walking towards Shigaraki, getting ready to face him one last time, just to buy a little bit of time for his team. He knows he can't defeat him alone, and that in all likelihood, he's going to die. But he's going to fight anyway, save to win. And here he is, trying to save his allies, even if it's only for a few more minutes. And so off he goes, and we learn that by storing up so much sweat, he's strained the glands in his hands, and now nitroglycerin's leaking out all over his body, which isn't good for your long-term physical well-being, as we'll soon see. And he doesn't give up, even though he seems outclassed. And his tenacity seemingly gives Shigaraki some Vietnam flashbacks of the second user of One for All. And I've seen a lot of different discussions surrounding why this would be, but when in doubt, I tend to lean towards the more obvious answer as being the best answer. So in this context, I'd simply assume that the tenacity, the drive, and the unyielding nature that's just oozing out of Bakugo in this moment reminds him of the second user, who was likely just very similar in personality and temperament. And in all likelihood, that guy probably had All for One fearing for his life in their confrontations with each other. So on top of that, his quirk is probably quite strong, like Bakugo's. Hell, it might even be very similar to Bakugo's, although the jury's out on that for the time being. Bakugo then has his own flashback moment, which is never a good sign if you're not the main character and are charging the main villain, and long story short, he pushes his body to the limit, and his heart seems to explode, leaving him in a crumpled heap, and pretty much looking dead. Shigaraki then taunts and laughs about how this is his Demon King moment. Bakugo's mum is shown thinking about how Bakugo hates the rain as it begins to rain, and all his allies are freaking out because, his chest exploded. He's dead. And of course, after that it ends on a cliffhanger. And since then, it's exploded out into the fandom. And there's of course the discussion of, he's not actually dead, right? Is he dead? Oh shit, he's dead. All that kind of stuff. And so, this has actually become a bit of a head scratcher moment for me. Is he dead? Is he actually gone? And I'm going to guess no. And there's a number of reasons for that. First up, these sorts of stories almost never kill off a character that's as important to the story as Bakugo. It just doesn't happen. And if they do die, it's not for long, or it's a fake out or whatever. So thematically, it doesn't really fit in with how the story's been told up to this point. We've had deaths, but they're all older heroes, mentor characters. Mentors always seem to die in these sorts of stories. It helps the protagonist grow and gives them their rage power-up moment. It helps to add some stakes to the storyline. But I feel like killing off the second main character, your second biggest protagonist, as well as the most popular character within the fandom, isn't something that really fits into the world that's being created here. Shit, almost none of the important characters die. I mean, there's like Night Eye and Midnight, and those aren't really major characters. And so a death of Bakugo's caliber would certainly serve to show that the finale is serious business. But once again, it just doesn't make much sense thematically, because it really just cuts his arc so short. This is the second major protagonist. There are no two ways about it. Over the course of the story, we've seen him grow and develop quite significantly. And so, on one hand, it is actually very interesting and unique to have this shock value ending to the story arc of such a major character. But at the same time, it doesn't feel very My Hero. This story loves the dramatic flourish, the final epic goodbye, at least for important characters. Remember how long Night Eye held on? Jeez. And he got impaled through the chest with a spike. He got his big farewell in hospital. And I mean, hell, the most important character for Bakugo's story, Deku, isn't even here with him when he supposedly dies. So whilst it sets up a cool moment where Deku stumbles across his corpse and enters rage mode again, and therefore bolsters Deku's personal arc, it would completely sacrifice Bakugo's and go against what we've seen in the past. And yes, you can say that this sort of storyline does make it feel more real, that not everybody gets a heroic exit, or last words, or time to say goodbye to their friend. But I feel like this sort of sudden death storyline works better for lesser characters. Having this be the ending of one of your big three just doesn't feel right. Plus, there are loose plot threads with the second wielder. Why does Bakugo remind him of him? What is going on there? That sort of explanation works best if Bakugo survives to keep going, as opposed to Shigaraki, for one, thinking about how this beaten corpse reminded him of an old enemy. It wouldn't be relevant anymore, and thus, the interest would drop. After all, he'd be dead and there's no payoff. Plus, he says that this is his Demon King moment. And remember, we learned in the past that the hero that was defeated to facilitate the rise of the Demon King in the comic that All for One read as a kid with his brother, eventually rises again to help defeat the villain. So yes, Deku is going to win, but I think Bakugo has to play a role in that victory, and not just giving him incentive to win through his death. But then on the other hand, this is his second death fake out. Come on. I could really understand people thinking that the second time should be fatal. Otherwise, it just reduces the stakes completely. So in conclusion, he ain't dead. I just don't think it makes sense for the story being told to eliminate him so early, without Deku even being present. I'm pretty sure the original ending had Deku give him one for all mid-fight to help them win via double power boost. And yes, they did that ending in that film, but I think they're going to do a variant of that ending returning here. I know it won't be the exact same thing, but I think there will be a similar result. And obviously, Bakugo needs to either not be dead, or be revived using any number of plot-armored reasons to do this. But regardless, I just don't think anyone's brave enough to kill him off. The fans are rabid for him. Don't do it. I'm scared. And so therefore, he should be back. But of course, that's just my opinion, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about Bakugo's supposed death? You think it's permanent, or just a bit of a cliffhanger red herring type of thing? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.